The alarm on Sarah Mitchell's phone buzzed at 5:15 a.m., dragging her from a fitful sleep. Outside her small Boulder apartment, the sky was still dark, painted in shades of deep blue and gray. She'd lived alone since her divorce 2 years ago, and the silence of mornings like this had become both comforting and suffocating. Sarah reached over and silenced the phone, lying still for another moment, gathering the mental fortitude to face another day. At 34, she'd been working as a 911 emergency dispatcher for 7 years, longer than most people stuck with the job. The burnout rate in dispatch was astronomical. Most lasted 3 or 4 years before the weight of human suffering became too much. But Sarah had lasted, and that said something about her constitution, her resilience, or perhaps her capacity for controlled numbness. She dragged herself out of bed, her bare feet cold against the wooden floor. The apartment was modest, a one-bedroom with second-hand furniture and walls decorated with framed photographs of her family, her parents in Arizona, her younger brother's kids, and one photo from her wedding day that she kept meaning to take down but never quite managed to. Sarah moved through her morning routine on autopilot, a shower where the water took 3 minutes to warm up. Black coffee, no sugar, just the way she developed a taste for it years ago. Oatmeal that she barely tasted as she ate it standing at her kitchen counter, reading the news on her phone. Another shooting somewhere. Another political scandal. Another weather warning she skimmed without fully processing. By 5:50 a.m., Sarah was dressed in her standard work attire, dark pants, light blue blouse, comfortable shoes that wouldn't make her feet scream by hour 8. She'd learned that comfort in small things mattered when you spent 8 hours in a chair, headset glued to your head, absorbing other people's emergencies like a psychological sponge. She pulled her shoulder-length brown hair into a practical ponytail, applied minimal makeup, just enough to look professional during the occasional visitor to the dispatch center, and grabbed her keys. The drive from her apartment to the Boulder County Emergency Services Center took exactly 22 minutes, a route she'd driven so many times that she could do it in a trance. The dispatch center was located in a nondescript building on the outskirts of Boulder, the kind of government structure that blended into the landscape, nothing special from the outside but vital within. Sarah had been coming here long enough to know every crack in the parking lot, every quirky habit of the building's temperamental heating system, every personality quirk of her fellow dispatchers. She pulled into her assigned spot at 6:10 a.m., 15 minutes early as always. Sarah believed in punctuality the way other people believed in religion. It was foundational to her sense of order and control. Walking through the glass doors, she nodded to Marcus, the overnight shift dispatcher who was preparing to hand off to the day crew. His face looked tired, the kind of exhausted that came from handling emergencies between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. Sarah had worked those shifts before. She knew what it did to a person's sleep cycle and mental health. Now she worked days, and it was one small mercy she'd negotiated for herself after 7 years of proving she was reliable. She collected her coffee from the break room. The center's coffee was terrible, burnt, and acidic, but it was free and hot, and made her way to her station. The dispatch center was a large open room with 14 stations arranged in rows. Each station had a computer monitor, a phone console with multiple lines, and a radio headset. Currently, only 4 stations were occupied. The other dispatchers wouldn't arrive until 7 a.m. Sarah settled into her chair and began her pre-shift routine. She logged into her computer system, reviewing the day's assignments and any ongoing situations from the overnight shift. She checked her equipment, her headset, her mouse, her keyboard, the small tools of her trade that could mean the difference between life and death. She'd learned early on that a broken headset or a delayed computer response could have catastrophic consequences. She'd seen it happen once, a critical delay that resulted in emergency responders arriving 8 minutes late. 8 minutes. The difference between someone surviving a heart attack and someone dying on a kitchen floor. That dispatcher had never worked again. The guilt had been too much. At 6:35 a.m., Sarah opened her email to check the morning briefing. That's when she saw it. A meteorological alert marked with an urgent red flag. She clicked on it, her eyes tracking across the Weather Service's technical language. The forecast had changed overnight. A winter storm system, initially predicted to arrive in the evening, had accelerated. Wind patterns had shifted. The storm would now make landfall in the mountain passes by early afternoon, perhaps even earlier. Sarah felt her breath catch slightly. November storms in the Colorado mountains were unpredictable and dangerous. They created whiteout conditions, zero visibility, treacherous driving situations where even experienced drivers could find themselves stranded within minutes. She printed the alert and made her way to her supervisor's office. Tom Chen, who'd been running the Boulder County Dispatch Center for 8 years, was already at his desk reviewing reports. Tom was in his 50s, a former firefighter who understood the realities of emergency response from personal experience. "Morning, Sarah. You're in early," he said, glancing up from his screen. "We've got an incoming storm system that's ahead of schedule," Sarah said, handing him the meteorological alert. Tom's eyes scanned the document quickly. His expression shifted slightly, acknowledging the new information. "That's not ideal. We'll need to put out a weather advisory to the mountain communities, increase staffing on the rescue lines." "Good catch." Tom had always valued Sarah's attention to detail, her instinctive awareness of potential problems. Sarah returned to her station as the other dispatchers began arriving. By 7 a.m., the center was at full capacity, all 14 stations occupied by experienced professionals. The morning dispatcher meeting was brief. Tom mentioned the weather system, reminded everyone to stay alert, and released them to their stations. Sarah plugged in her headset and switched her phone lines to active. The first calls of the day began filtering in. A car accident on the highway, a medical check-on for an elderly resident, a noise complaint about early construction. Routine stuff, the bread and butter of dispatch work. But Sarah's attention kept drifting back to the weather monitor on her secondary screen. She watched the storm system progress across the radar map, a swirling pattern of red and yellow indicating severe weather. Her fingers drummed against her desk, a nervous habit she'd never quite broken. The other dispatchers worked in their own zones, isolated in their headsets, focused on their calls. But Sarah was different. She didn't just respond to emergencies, she anticipated them. She studied patterns, understood geography, internalized the vulnerabilities of her service area. The mountain passes, particularly Highway 7 near Eagles Pass, were going to be particularly treacherous this afternoon. The road was narrow, winding, with limited cell service and even fewer pull-off areas. It was exactly the kind of place where someone could get stranded without help, where a mechanical failure could become a life-threatening situation within minutes. Sarah checked the clock. 6:47 a.m. The morning had just begun, but something in her gut was already twisting. Her instinct, the same instinct that had earned her the call sign Falcon years ago, was screaming that today was going to be different from other Thursdays. She just didn't know yet how profoundly different it would be. The afternoon shift at the Boulder County Dispatch Center had settled into its typical rhythm. It was 2:30 p.m., and Sarah had been at her station for 8 hours straight, working through the standard parade of emergencies and non-emergencies that formed the backbone of emergency services. A fender bender on Broadway Street. A welfare check on an elderly woman who hadn't answered her phone in 2 days. She was fine, just sleeping. A teenager who'd gotten their hand caught in a door. Nothing catastrophic, nothing that would require her full concentration and expert instincts. But Sarah's attention had been split all day. Every few minutes, her eyes drifted to the weather monitor on her secondary screen. The storm system had continued to accelerate, moving faster than the meteorologists had predicted. The satellite imagery showed a tightening spiral of clouds, deepening in color from yellow to orange to red. The wind speed indicators were climbing. Sarah's water bottle sat beside her keyboard, nearly empty. She'd refilled it 4 times that day, a nervous habit when she was anxious about something. She couldn't explain why this storm had gotten under her skin so thoroughly. Certainly, she'd worked through dangerous weather before. She'd coordinated rescues during blizzards, helped dispatch emergency personnel through flash floods, guided people to safety during ice storms. But something about today felt different. It was that sense, that sixth sense, that had earned her the call sign Falcon 5 years ago. She'd been working a shift when a small aircraft reported engine trouble. Based on nothing more than intuition and a careful study of wind patterns, Sarah had predicted that the plane would drift east of its reported trajectory. She'd suggested that search and rescue teams position themselves in a specific valley, one that wasn't even in the official search grid. When the plane crashed, it was found in exactly that location, and the quick positioning of rescue teams had meant the difference between the pilot surviving and not surviving. Her supervisor Tom had overheard her radio communication that night and had started calling her Falcon for her ability to see danger from a distance, to spot patterns that others missed. The name had stuck, becoming her informal call sign throughout the entire region. Other dispatchers sometimes asked her how she did it, how she knew things before they happened. Sarah never had a good answer. It was just something she felt, a tightness in her chest, a pattern recognition that operated below the level of conscious thought. At 2:47 p.m., the red light on her phone console began blinking, an incoming call on the emergency line. Sarah clicked the button and opened the channel, her voice immediately professional and calm. "Boulder County Emergency Services, this is Falcon. What is your emergency?" There was a beat of silence, and then a man's voice came through, breathless, panicked, barely controlled. The quality of the audio was poor, crackling with static. That immediately told Sarah something: cell service. The caller was calling from a cell phone, probably on a mountain where the signal was weak and unstable. "Help, God, please help us. We've broken down on the highway, Highway 7, and my wife is having chest pain, severe chest pain. We need an ambulance, we need someone." The man's voice cracked, genuine terror bleeding through every word. Sarah's training kicked in immediately, overriding any emotional response. She began typing notes into her computer system with her left hand while keeping her voice steady and reassuring. "Sir, I'm here to help you. I need you to take a deep breath and give me some information. First, can you tell me your name?" She could hear him breathing heavily, the panic in his respiration matching the elevated tone of his voice. James Patterson, and my wife is Margaret. Oh God, her pain is getting worse. She's grabbing her chest and she can't." He was losing control, the words tumbling out in a rush. In the background, Sarah heard another sound, a woman's voice, strained and frightened, making sounds of distress, and something else, high-pitched and frightened. Children. There were children in that vehicle. "James, I need you to listen to me very carefully," Sarah said, her voice intentionally firm, the kind of tone that could cut through panic and command attention. "You are not alone right now. I am here with you. What I need you to do is stay calm and give me specific information. Are you safe to talk to me while you're broken down?" Yes, we pulled off the road. We're on the shoulder, but James, there's no one out here. No cars, nothing. Where are we? Where is this place?" Margaret's voice came through, terrified and in pain. Sarah's mind was already racing, calculating distances and response times. She quickly pulled up the GPS coordinates for Highway 7 near Eagles Pass, studying the terrain map. Her stomach sank as she reviewed the data. This was a remote area, beautiful during summer months, deadly during winter. Cell service was spotty at best. Ground ambulance response time from the nearest hospital was 45 to 50 minutes, depending on exact location and road conditions. "James, listen to me. I'm pulling up your location right now. Can you see any mile markers or road signs?" Sarah's hands were already moving, typing commands, initiating protocols. She glanced at the weather monitor. The storm was now showing wind speeds exceeding 40 miles per hour in the mountain passes. Visibility would be degrading rapidly. "There's a sign. It says mile marker 47, James said, his voice shaking. "How long until someone gets here? Margaret says the pain is like an elephant is sitting on her chest. She can't breathe properly. She's scared. I'm scared." In the background, Margaret let out a groan of pain that sounded like genuine cardiac distress. Sarah's professional experience had exposed her to hundreds of medical emergencies, and something in that sound, the quality, the severity, told her this was serious. This wasn't indigestion or anxiety. This was a real medical emergency, and it was happening in one of the most remote, difficult-to-access locations in her service area. Sarah's fingers flew across her keyboard as she began reviewing Margaret's options. Ground ambulance would take 45 minutes minimum. The nearest hospital was Colorado Springs Memorial, 30 miles away. Even driving at normal speeds with no traffic, the Pattersons were looking at 45 minutes to an hour to reach medical care. But there was another option, and Sarah was already thinking about it. The Air National Guard base at Peterson was only 20 miles away. Black Hawk helicopters stationed there were equipped for medical transport. In good weather, helicopter response time to Eagles Pass would be approximately 12 to 15 minutes, but weather was the critical factor. The storm was closing in. Visibility windows were measured in minutes, not hours. "James, I need you to check on your wife. Is she conscious? Can she talk to me?" Sarah asked, her mind already working through the decision tree. Protocol would say to wait, to assess, to give ground ambulance time to respond. But Falcon's instinct was screaming at her. This woman needed immediate intervention, and the window for helicopter evacuation was closing by the minute. "She's conscious, but the pain is really bad. She's never complained like this before. What do I do? What do I do?" James's voice had risen to nearly a shout. "You stay calm because Margaret needs you to be calm," Sarah said. "I'm going to get you help. I'm getting you help right now. Don't hang up. Stay on the line with me." Sarah was already looking at her supervisor. Tom was watching from his desk, and when their eyes met, he nodded. He understood what she was about to do. Falcon was about to ask for something unusual, something that required going beyond standard protocol. And Tom trusted her completely. Sarah's fingers were already moving before she'd finished talking to James. Her training had prepared her for moments like this, those critical junctures where a dispatcher's decision could mean the difference between a patient reaching a hospital alive or not. She typed a preliminary incident report into the system, flagging it as critical, possible acute coronary syndrome, remote location, limited ground access. Within seconds, 3 other dispatchers had seen the alert and were standing ready, waiting for orders. This was how her team worked. When Falcon flagged something as critical, everyone moved. "Tom," Sarah called out, not bothering to raise her voice above normal volume because her supervisor was already moving toward her station, having seen the alert on the center's main monitoring screen. Tom Chen's face was calm but focused, the expression of a man who'd spent 25 years in emergency response and knew exactly what high-stakes situations looked like. "I've got a cardiac patient at Highway 7, mile marker 47, remote location, weather window closing rapidly," Sarah said, her voice steady and professional. "Ground ambulance is 45 minutes minimum. Patient is symptomatic for acute coronary event, pain radiating from chest, difficulty breathing. I'm requesting immediate helicopter evacuation from Peterson." Tom didn't hesitate. Most supervisors would have asked for more information, would have consulted protocol, would have second-guessed the request. Tom simply nodded. "Do it. I'll notify the regional coordinator." He understood that Sarah didn't ask for extraordinary measures lightly. In her 7 years of working dispatch, she requested helicopter evacuation perhaps 8 times, and every single one of those calls had proven justified by outcome. Her instincts had been flawless. Sarah was already dialing the number for the Regional Emergency Coordination Center, the organization that oversaw emergency services across multiple counties. The phone rang twice before she heard the crisp voice of Director Patricia Walsh. "Regional Emergency Coordination. This is Patricia." "Patricia, this is Falcon at Boulder County. I need immediate Black Hawk dispatch from Peterson for an emergency medical evacuation. Patient is female, approximately 50 years old, presenting with acute cardiac symptoms, possibly acute myocardial infarction. Location is Highway 7, mile marker 47. Ground access is limited and worsening weather conditions. Request immediate helicopter response. Sarah had learned to communicate with military and regional coordinators in their language. Direct, efficient, no wasted words. Understood, Falcon. Let me confirm details and coordinate with Peterson. There was a brief silence as Patricia pulled up the information on her end. Sarah could hear keyboard clicks, the muted background noise of a busy coordination center. I'm seeing your incident report. Critical patient, remote location, deteriorating weather. I'm marking this as priority urgent, connecting you directly to Black Hawk operations. Stand by. The line transferred and a new voice came through, this one with the precise diction of military personnel. Black Hawk 3-1 Operations, Captain Derek Chen speaking. Regional coordination has flagged your emergency. What's your situation? Sarah took a breath and ran through the critical details again. Captain, I have a critical cardiac patient stranded on Highway 7 near Eagles Pass. Mile marker 47. Patient is female, approximately 50, presenting with acute chest pain, dyspnea, possible acute myocardial infarction. Current weather conditions are clear but deteriorating rapidly. Storm system moving in from the northwest. Wind speeds currently 30 knots, projected to intensify. Current visibility approximately 2 miles, projected to drop below 1 mile within 8 minutes. Ground ambulance response time exceeds 45 minutes. I'm requesting immediate helicopter evacuation. Understood, Falcon. We're mobilizing Black Hawk 3-1 immediately. ETA to your location is approximately 12 to 14 minutes, depending on exact coordinates. Can you confirm current status of the patient while we dispatch? Sarah immediately switched her headset back to the Patterson family line. James, I still need you with me. How is Margaret doing? Has her pain changed at all? James's voice came back strained. It's worse. She's having trouble breathing now. She says her arm is numb. What does that mean? What does that mean? The panic was rising in his voice again, threatening to spiral. In the background, Sarah could hear Margaret making small sounds of distress, and the children. She could now hear that there were 2 of them, their voices small and frightened in the background. That's her body's response to the cardiac stress, Sarah said, her voice deliberately calm and authoritative. I want you to listen very carefully. Help is coming. I'm sending a helicopter directly to your location. They're trained to handle exactly this situation. I need you to do something for me, James. I need you to get Margaret as comfortable as possible. Can you recline her seat? Yes, I can do that. Okay, I'm moving her to lie back. Margaret, honey, just lie back and try to breathe slowly. Help is coming. Sarah switched back to Captain Chen. Patient symptoms are escalating. Chest pain intensifying, dyspnea worsening, report of radiating arm numbness. This is textbook acute coronary syndrome. Recommend maximum speed response. Confirmed, Falcon. Black Hawk 3-1 is lifting off now. ETA to Eagles Pass is 13 minutes. What's your current weather assessment? Sarah was already pulling up her secondary weather monitoring system, the one that showed real-time meteorological data for the mountain passes. She'd been monitoring it obsessively all afternoon, watching the storm system move closer, watching the predicted arrival time accelerate. Current conditions at Eagles Pass are clear but transitioning rapidly. Wind speeds are 35 knots and climbing. Visibility is approximately 2 miles. Cloud ceiling is dropping. Storm system is moving faster than predicted. You're going to have a very tight window, Captain. My estimate is that you have approximately 8 to 10 minutes maximum before conditions become unsafe for helicopter landing. There was a brief pause on the line. Derek Chen was calculating the same thing Sarah was. They were asking for the impossible. The helicopter needed 14 minutes to reach Eagles Pass. They had maybe 10 minutes before conditions became too dangerous. Understood, Falcon. We're going to push this aircraft. I need you to guide us in with precise real-time weather data. Can you do that?" "Absolutely," Sarah said. "I'm monitoring 3 separate weather systems. I'll give you real-time updates every 90 seconds." Tom was now standing beside Sarah's station, monitoring her screen along with her. He'd seen her do this before, this delicate balance of pushing emergency response to its absolute limits while maintaining safety protocols. He also knew that Sarah was the only person he would trust to make this call accurately. One mistake, one moment of hesitation or overconfidence, and a helicopter crew could find themselves in a whiteout situation with no visibility and no safe landing options. Sarah's other work had shifted to the other dispatchers. She delegated calls to her colleagues, clearing her board of all other incidents so she could focus entirely on the Patterson family and coordinating the helicopter response. This was a calculated decision. Other emergencies would be handled by her team while she devoted herself completely to this critical situation. It was the kind of prioritization that only a supervisor could authorize, and Tom had implicitly done so by taking over her other calls himself. "James, I need you to do something for me," Sarah said, switching back to the family line. "I need you to find a clear area where that helicopter can land. It doesn't have to be large, just open ground without trees or obstacles. Can you see anything like that from your vehicle?" There's a wide shoulder here. It's maybe 50 feet to the road from where we are. The ground looks relatively flat. Will that work?" "That's perfect," Sarah said. "Keep Margaret as calm as possible. Tell her that help is minutes away. Help is literally minutes away, James. You're doing everything right." She pulled up the geographic data for that specific location, studying the terrain carefully. Mile marker 47 on Highway 7 was just past Eagles Pass proper, in a relatively open area surrounded by rocky terrain and scattered pine trees. The shoulder James described would work, though it wouldn't be an ideal landing zone. But ideal wasn't an option anymore. They were past ideal. They were in the realm of difficult choices and tight margins. Sarah looked at the weather monitor again. The storm system was now showing wind speeds of 42 knots. The helicopter had approximately 9 minutes to reach Eagles Pass and land before conditions became critical. 9 minutes to save a life. Peterson Space Force Base sat on the eastern edge of Colorado Springs, a sprawling installation that served as home to some of the most advanced military aircraft in North America. 20 miles away from the mountains, it was barely a 10-minute drive from downtown Colorado Springs. But this afternoon, a different kind of distance mattered, the aerial distance between the base and the remote stretch of Highway 7, where a woman was having a heart attack. Captain Derek Chen sat in the Black Hawk helicopter cockpit, methodically working through the pre-flight checklist with the practiced precision of a pilot who'd logged more than 2,000 hours of flight time. Derek was 42. A career Air Force officer who'd served 3 tours overseas and had developed a reputation as someone who remained calm in catastrophic situations. His hands moved through the checklist items with automatic competence while his mind was elsewhere, thinking about the weather forecast he'd reviewed that morning. An afternoon storm system had been predicted, but the latest data suggested it was moving faster than expected. He'd made a mental note to keep an eye on it. In the rear of the helicopter, Staff Sergeant Marcus Williams was checking the medical equipment one final time. Marcus was the crew's primary medic, trained in emergency medicine and helicopter evacuation procedures. He'd been with Derek for the past 4 years and had developed an almost telepathic understanding of what Derek needed from his crew during high-stress situations. Beside him, Sergeant Alina Vasquez and Sergeant James Morrison were reviewing their equipment harnesses and preparing for rapid deployment if needed. The Black Hawk crew was small but incredibly skilled. Each person could anticipate what the others needed before being asked. The radio on Derek's headset crackled with the routine communication of a busy military base. Other aircraft were preparing for afternoon flights. Ground crews were conducting maintenance checks. the constant hum of organized military operations. Derek wasn't expecting anything particularly dramatic for this shift. Most of his flights were training exercises, routine transport missions, or precautionary standby situations that never quite became active responses. The dramatic rescue calls that required helicopter evacuation were rare, maybe once or twice a month on average. That changed at 2:52 p.m. when the emergency frequency on Derek's radio came alive with urgent traffic. All available units in the Colorado Springs region be advised. This is regional emergency coordination. We have a critical medical emergency requiring immediate helicopter evacuation. Location is Highway 7, mile marker 47, Boulder County jurisdiction. Patient is female, approximately 50 years old, presenting with acute cardiac symptoms. Ground ambulance response time exceeds 45 minutes. Weather deterioration imminent. Black Hawk 3-1 from Peterson Space Force Base is being mobilized for immediate response. Acknowledge. Derek's head came up from the checklist. He and Marcus exchanged a quick glance. Marcus immediately began double-checking his medical equipment with increased urgency. Black Hawk 3-1, this is Derek Chen. We acknowledge. Mobilizing immediately, Derek keyed into the radio. His hands were already moving, switching the pre-flight from routine to emergency protocol. Marcus, we're going hot. Possible cardiac emergency, remote mountain location, deteriorating weather. Ready when you are, sir, Marcus replied, his voice calm and professional, though Derek could sense the shift in energy through the fuselage. This was what they trained for, what they drilled endlessly, the real thing, the moments that actually mattered. Derek initiated the helicopter's engines, feeling the familiar vibration as power surged through the aircraft. The rotor blades began their slow rotation, gradually accelerating. The pre-flight that would have taken another 15 minutes was now compressed into 3. Derek communicated with air traffic control, received clearance for immediate departure, and lifted the Black Hawk off the tarmac within 5 minutes. The base was used to emergency departures. The personnel moved without hesitation to support the rapid launch. Once they were airborne and climbing, Derek switched his communication channel to regional emergency coordination. That's when Patricia Walsh's voice came back with additional information. Black Hawk 3-1, regional coordination. We're connecting you with the primary dispatcher on this incident. She'll be your primary communication point for real-time updates and guidance. Call sign is Falcon. Channel switching now. Derek's hands paused on the controls for just a fraction of a second. Falcon. He knew that call sign. Years ago, when he'd been working with the Mountain Search and Rescue Coordination, he'd worked with Falcon on a critical aircraft emergency response. She'd been the dispatcher for that incident, and her guidance had been instrumental in orchestrating the rescue of a downed pilot. Derek had never forgotten it. He'd actually asked about her after that mission, hoping to work with her again. The Mountain Rescue Coordinator had explained that Falcon was legendary in emergency dispatch circles. Her instincts were considered nearly supernatural, and her ability to coordinate complex responses was unmatched. The channel switched and a familiar calm voice came through. Black Hawk 3-1, this is Falcon. Welcome back to the mountains. I have your patient and I have your weather situation. Current conditions are manageable but deteriorating rapidly. I need you pushing this aircraft hard. Derek felt something settle in his chest, a sense of confidence, almost of certainty. Having Falcon on the line meant they were in the most capable hands possible. Falcon, it's good to hear your voice. Derek Chen on the controls. What's your current assessment? Derek, I remember you, Sarah's voice came back, warm for just a moment before shifting back to professional focus. Current patient status. Female, 52 years old, acute chest pain, radiating to left arm, dyspnea, presenting with classic acute myocardial infarction symptoms. Location is Highway 7, mile marker 47. Family is in the vehicle, 2 children present as well. Ground access is limited. You have approximately 9 to 10 minutes of viable landing, whether before storm conditions become unsafe. ETA to Eagles Pass. 13 minutes at current airspeed, Derek said. Can you get me that window expanded? Negative, Derek. Weather system is accelerating. I'm tracking it in real time. You're going to need to push your airspeed or find a way to reduce your response time. Landing conditions will be marginal at best when you arrive. Derek already knew what that meant. He pressed the helicopter forward, increasing the rotor blade pitch and pushing the aircraft to maximum cruise speed. The airframe shuddered slightly with the exertion. Black Hawks weren't designed for aggressive speed pushing, but they could manage it for short periods. Falcon, I'm increasing to maximum safe airspeed. That should cut about 2 minutes off my ETA. What about landing zone, terrain conditions, hazards? Landing zone is Highway 7 shoulder near mile marker 47. Wide shoulder, relatively flat but uneven terrain with some rocks. No trees immediately adjacent but narrow corridor with pine trees flanking both sides. Wind will be a factor, currently 35 knots, gusting toward 40. You'll need precision flying. Marcus was preparing the medical equipment in the rear, arranging everything he'd need for a rapid cardiac stabilization and transport. He knew from experience that whoever Falcon was, and her reputation preceded her, if Falcon was managing this call, the patient was genuinely critical. Falcon didn't generate false alarms. Alina and James were checking their rappelling equipment, though hopefully they wouldn't need it. Hopefully the helicopter could land safely and conduct a ground extraction. Rappelling in these conditions would be exponentially more dangerous. Falcon, I want you to understand something, Derek said, his voice steady. My crew and I trust your judgment completely. If you tell me to push, we push. If you tell me to abort, we abort. But I need accurate, real-time information to make good decisions. Understood, Derek, you'll have it. I've got your back from here on the ground. Patient is conscious and stabilizing slightly with reassurance. Family is frightened but holding together. When you arrive, I'll direct you precisely to the landing zone. You focus on flying. I'll focus on everything else. That's exactly what I needed to hear, Derek said. The Black Hawk cut through the afternoon sky toward the mountains, the afternoon sunlight casting long shadows across the landscape below. Derek could see the leading edge of the storm system in the distance, a dark mass of clouds that seemed to be actively approaching, growing larger and more imposing with each passing minute. The weather situation was worse than he'd anticipated, and Derek had flown through some seriously bad conditions. This storm was moving like something alive, something determined. Derek, be advised, Falcon's voice came through, calm but with an edge of urgency. Wind speeds are now 42 knots at Eagles Pass. Visibility is dropping. You have approximately 7 minutes of safe landing window remaining. Current ETA. Derek checked his instruments. The mountains were growing larger, closer. 8 minutes. That's cutting it extremely close, Falcon said. But I believe you can do this. I believe in you, Derek. Now come get my patient. The dispatch center had transformed into something that resembled a war room. Sarah sat at the center of a web of information, her eyes tracking 3 separate computer monitors simultaneously. The primary screen showed the geographic terrain of Highway 7 near Eagles Pass. The secondary screen displayed real-time weather data from the Meteorological Service. The third screen showed communications logs and medical status updates. Behind her, Tom Chen had positioned himself where he could monitor everything Sarah was doing, ready to step in if needed, but understanding that Falcon needed to work without interference. On Sarah's left, her colleague David Rodriguez had taken over her other emergency calls. On her right, Patricia from Regional Emergency Coordination was monitoring the helicopter's progress and standing ready to coordinate with the hospital. The weight of what they were attempting was palpable. Somewhere in the dispatch center, someone had whispered the phrase "miracle mission," but Sarah had immediately shut that down internally. Miracles were for prayers. What they were conducting was professional expertise, training, and precise execution. No miracles required. Falcon to all units, Sarah keyed her radio, her voice calm despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Updated weather assessment. Storm system is accelerating beyond meteorological predictions. Current wind speeds at Eagles Pass are 42 knots with gusts approaching 45. Visibility has dropped to 1.25 miles. Ceiling is approximately 300 feet and lowering. Recommend all air operations maintain maximum situational awareness and prepare for rapid weather deterioration. The acknowledgments came back from various units. Derek's voice came through from the Black Hawk. Falcon, confirming current weather data. ETA to Eagles Pass is now 8 minutes. I'm pushing this aircraft to the absolute limit. The airframe is straining, but we can sustain this for the time required. Understood, Derek. Current landing window is approximately 6 to 7 minutes before conditions become unsafe. You're going to be cutting it very close. I need you to start descending approach now. I'm going to guide you visually once you have the area in sight. Sarah switched channels to the Patterson family. The strain in James Patterson's voice was immediately apparent. Falcon, where is that helicopter? Margaret's pain is getting worse again. She says she feels like she's going to pass out. What do I do? What do I do if she loses consciousness? Sarah's voice remained steady, even though her heart was racing. She could hear Margaret groaning in the background, a sound that cut directly through Sarah's professional distance. This was the part of dispatch work that nobody talked about, the moment when you had to care deeply while remaining emotionally detached enough to function. James, listen to me very carefully. If Margaret loses consciousness, I need you to check if she's still breathing. If she's breathing, keep her on her back with her feet elevated. If she stops breathing, I'm going to guide you through CPR. Can you do that? I don't know CPR, James's voice cracked with panic. I don't know how to do CPR. Then we're going to learn together right now, Sarah said, her voice taking on the quality of absolute authority that she could summon when needed. I'm going to teach you, and the helicopter will be there in minutes. Margaret, can you hear me? Sarah was addressing the patient directly now, something she did when patients were on the edge of consciousness. Margaret's voice came through weakly. I'm here. Margaret, my name is Sarah, and I'm the dispatcher coordinating your rescue. There is a Black Hawk helicopter coming to get you right now. You're going to be okay. I need you to stay focused on my voice. Can you do that for me? Yes, Margaret said, her voice barely more than a whisper. Sarah switched back to Derek. Derek, patient is conscious but deteriorating. Pain is escalating. Possible imminent loss of consciousness. I need you in that landing zone in the next 5 minutes. Falcon, understood. I'm starting my descent approach now. Visual contact with the mountains in approximately 4 minutes. Current winds are pushing the aircraft about 15 degrees north of our planned track, compensating now. Sarah was already adjusting her guidance. Derek, I'm seeing that wind deviation in the meteorological data. There's a jet stream effect coming off the ridge. Adjust your approach vector approximately 18 degrees southwest, and you should compensate for the wind drift. The landing zone will come into view just beyond the ridge line. Adjusting now, Falcon. Appreciate the detailed guidance. Starting descent. Tom Chen leaned over and placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder, a gesture of confidence and support. Sarah felt it but didn't acknowledge it. She couldn't afford to break concentration now. Every piece of information she provided, every vector adjustment she recommended, every detail she communicated could be the difference between Derek landing safely and the helicopter drifting into terrain or trees. Sarah's eyes were fixed on the weather monitor. The storm system was visible now on the satellite imagery, a tight spiral of clouds with wind speeds exceeding 50 knots at the leading edge. It was like watching a predator approach its prey in slow motion, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. The question wasn't whether the storm would reach Eagles Pass. The question was how many minutes they had before it arrived. All units, this is Falcon. Updated weather warning. Storm system approaching Eagles Pass from the northwest. Wind speeds at the system's leading edge are currently 53 knots. System will reach Eagles Pass in approximately 5 to 6 minutes. All ground personnel prepare for severe weather conditions. Helicopter operations will become unsafe immediately upon system arrival. Falcon, this is Black Hawk 3-1, Derek's voice came through, steady despite the obvious strain of pushing the aircraft to its limits. I have visual contact with the mountains. I can see the ridge line you're describing. Looking for Highway 7 now. Sarah leaned toward her monitor. Derek, highway corridor should be visible just beneath you, running northeast to southwest. You're looking for a wide vehicle shoulder approximately 30 meters off the road. Patient is in a vehicle on that shoulder. I see the highway, Derek called back. Traffic is minimal due to the weather warning. I'm scanning the shoulders now. I see it. I see a vehicle on the northern shoulder. Is that your patient? Sarah immediately switched to the Patterson line. James, do you see a Black Hawk helicopter above you? Yes, I see it. Oh my God, I see it. James's voice rose with hope. It's so big, it's beautiful. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Derek, confirming visual contact. That's your patient below, Sarah said. Proceed with landing approach. Landing zone appears clear of immediate obstacles. Watch for wind shear coming off the ridge to your southeast. Winds are gusting 48 knots but should stabilize as you descend into the shelter of the valley. Understood, Falcon. Initiating landing approach. Descending to landing altitude now. Sarah's eyes moved back to the weather monitor. The storm was impossibly close now, the leading edge just minutes away from the mountains. The dark mass of clouds seemed to be advancing like a wave. She was tracking it in real time, seeing the wind speed readings in the metadata, watching the visibility projections drop from mile to half mile to quarter mile. Derek, I need to be direct with you. You now have 3 minutes, maybe less, before storm conditions become unsafe. You are literally racing the weather. Your weather window is closing. Falcon, I understand completely. I'm committed to this landing. Hold on, I'm in the final approach now. Visibility is becoming marginal. I'm focusing on the vehicle below. Rotor wash is kicking up significant dust, preparing to touch down. Sarah's hands gripped the edge of her desk. She was no longer typing, no longer scanning information. She was simply present, holding the space for Derek and his crew, believing with every fiber of her being that he could do this impossible thing. Land a helicopter in marginal conditions, with minutes before the weather became completely untenable. The wind speeds on her monitor now showed 47 knots. The visibility projection showed conditions worsening to 0 within 4 minutes. And somewhere in the mountains, a Black Hawk helicopter was descending toward the ground in conditions that were deteriorating by the second. Sarah's voice came through one more time, quiet and certain. Derek, you've got this. Land this bird and get that patient. I believe in you. All she could do now was wait. The helicopter descended through increasingly turbulent air. Derek felt every gust of wind in the controls, pushing and pulling at the Black Hawk's frame like an invisible giant trying to knock the aircraft sideways. His hands moved with the precision of a surgeon, micro-adjustments to compensate for wind shear, crosswinds, and the unpredictable air currents that swirled around the mountain ridge. The rotor blades thrummed above him, the sound a constant vibration that Derek's body had learned to ignore decades ago. His eyes were locked on the vehicle below, a silver sedan positioned on the highway shoulder, and he could see movement inside it. People, a family, a woman who was having a heart attack. I've got the vehicle in sight, Derek transmitted to Sarah. Commencing landing approach now. Visibility is approximately 1 mile and deteriorating. Wind is still gusting above 45 knots, but I'm managing it, coming down to 100 feet above ground level. In the back of the Black Hawk, Marcus Williams had already unstrapped himself from his crew position and moved to the open cargo door. The wind howling through that door was almost a physical force, threatening to tear him out of the aircraft if he wasn't secured by his harness. Elena and James had positioned themselves to assist with the patient extraction once Marcus established contact with the family. They'd done this dozens of times. The choreography of emergency extraction was something they could execute with their eyes closed. But doing it in marginal weather conditions, against a closing time window, added exponentially to the complexity and danger. The ground was approaching rapidly. Derek could now see the sedan clearly, could see a man's face pressed against the window looking up at the descending helicopter. The rotor wash from the Black Hawk was already kicking up significant dust and snow, creating a vortex of white that made the ground rapidly disappear from sight. This was one of the most dangerous moments of helicopter operations. The transition from visual flight to instrument-based guidance, while simultaneously trying to land on an unprepared surface. Derek shifted his vision to his instruments, the instruments that would tell him his altitude, his rate of descent, his exact position. The altimeter showed 90 feet, 80 feet, 70 feet. The ground was down there somewhere beneath that wall of dust. He was flying blind now, trusting his instruments and trusting his training. "Derek, you're looking good," Sarah's voice came through his headset, calm and confident. "You're positioned directly above the landing zone. Slight drift to the northeast. Adjust your controls approximately 2 degrees southwest to center on the target zone." Derek made the micro-adjustment. The helicopter shifted slightly. He could see the outline of the vehicle below, just barely visible through the dust cloud his own rotor wash had created. "I've got the vehicle in sight visually again, 50 feet above ground level, preparing to touch down." The Black Hawk descended the final 50 feet in what seemed like slow motion, but was actually occurring in just seconds. Derek's focus was absolute. His entire consciousness concentrated on the delicate task of settling a multi-ton aircraft onto an unprepared surface in high winds. The skids, the helicopter's equivalent of landing gear, made contact with the ground. Derek felt the resistance, the friction, the aircraft settling. For one heart-stopping moment, he thought the wind might catch them, might tip the helicopter, might turn this perfectly executed approach into a disaster. But the aircraft held. The Black Hawk was down. "Touchdown," Derek confirmed, his hands still maintaining control pressure on the cyclic and collective controls. The engines were still running at high RPM, ready to lift off immediately if conditions deteriorated further. "Landing zone secured. We are on the ground. Go, go, go." Marcus didn't wait for a second instruction. He was already moving, his medical equipment pack secured to his harness, his body moving through the turbulent rotor wash toward the sedan. Elena and James were right behind him, moving in perfect coordination. The wind from the rotor blades was now gusting at nearly 50 knots, the dust and snow creating visibility measured in feet rather than miles. It was chaos, organized chaos, but chaos nonetheless. Marcus reached the sedan's passenger door. The father, James Patterson, had already opened it. Margaret was visible in the passenger seat, her face gray, her breathing labored. Marcus could see immediately that her condition had deteriorated significantly since the initial phone call. He'd done enough emergency medicine to recognize the signs of a serious cardiac event. The cyanotic lips, the difficulty breathing, the way her body was slumped in the seat. "I'm Marcus with Air National Guard Rescue," he shouted over the rotor noise, though the family couldn't really hear him over the deafening sound. "We're getting you to the hospital. Can you move?" Margaret shook her head slightly, indicating she couldn't move without assistance. That was fine. Marcus and Elena were trained for exactly this situation. They moved Margaret from the vehicle with practiced efficiency, securing her to a stretcher with practiced movements that took less than 30 seconds. The two children, a boy who looked about 8 and a girl who looked about 5, were wide-eyed with shock and fear, but James was keeping them together, moving them toward the helicopter. "James, get the kids aboard now," Marcus commanded, his voice carrying the kind of authority that people instinctively obeyed in crisis situations. "Keep them strapped in. Don't touch anything." James herded the children toward the helicopter's open cargo door. The rotor wash was intensifying, the wind now becoming almost too powerful to fight against. Elena grabbed the eldest child and helped boost him up into the aircraft's cargo area. James followed with the younger child, both of them moving with desperate urgency. "Falcon, we're loading now," Derek transmitted. "Patient is secured on stretcher. Family is loading. ETA for full evacuation is 90 seconds. "Derek, be advised," Sarah's voice came back, and Derek could hear the tension in her voice now, the professional calm beginning to crack slightly. "Weather window is closing. Wind speeds are now 51 knots. Visibility is down to approximately 0.8 of a mile. Recommend rapid liftoff once loading is complete. You have approximately 3 minutes before conditions become unsafe." Marcus and James had now loaded the children into the helicopter. Margaret was being lifted by Marcus and James Morrison, their hands supporting her body as they moved toward the cargo door. Margaret's eyes were half closed, her breathing shallow. The cardiologist in Colorado Springs Memorial Hospital would later say that Margaret was approximately 20 minutes away from complete cardiovascular collapse. The helicopter rescue had bought her exactly 20 minutes of life, 20 minutes that allowed trained cardiac surgeons to intervene, to perform emergency catheterization, to place stents, to save her life. But none of that mattered right now. Right now, they just needed to get her into the helicopter and get airborne. Marcus and James lifted Margaret into the cargo bay. Elena was already positioned to receive her, securing her to the stretcher with rapid practiced movements. The stretcher was locked into place. James Patterson threw himself into the remaining cargo seat, his body shaking with adrenaline and relief. The children, terrified and cold and shocked, huddled together, watching their mother lying on the stretcher with medical personnel hovering over her. "We're loaded," Marcus transmitted to Derek. "All personnel aboard, clear to lift off." "Lifting off now." Derek didn't wait for further confirmation. He increased power to the rotor blades, felt the aircraft respond, felt the skids losing contact with the ground. The Black Hawk rose vertically, climbing away from the highway's shoulder into the deteriorating weather. Behind them, the wind howled across the empty shoulder where they'd been less than 90 seconds before. In another 30 seconds, that same shoulder would be engulfed in whiteout conditions as the storm system's leading edge reached Eagles Pass. They had lifted off with barely 90 seconds to spare. In the dispatch center, Sarah watched the confirmation on her screen. The helicopter was airborne. The family was safe. The extraction was complete. She allowed herself exactly 3 seconds of relief before switching her focus entirely to coordinating the flight to Colorado Springs Memorial Hospital and ensuring that Margaret received the medical intervention she desperately needed. Outside her dispatch center window, the first flurries of the major storm system were beginning to fall on Boulder. The mountains beyond, where Derek and his crew were flying, were already being consumed by the advancing weather. They had done the impossible, and now they were racing back toward safety with a dying woman aboard. The Black Hawk climbed through the turbulent air, the aircraft shaking with the force of the wind it was fighting. Derek kept his focus absolute, his hands steady on the controls as he navigated the helicopter into increasingly dangerous weather conditions. The visibility outside the cockpit had deteriorated to perhaps 200 meters, barely enough to see the rotor blades spinning above him. He was flying partially on instruments now, partially on experience, partially on the skill that had been honed across 2,000 hours of flight time and 3 military tours. Behind him, in the cargo bay, Marcus Williams was engaged in a completely different kind of emergency. Margaret Patterson lay on the stretcher, her body responding with increasing irregularity to the cardiac stress that was overwhelming her system. Marcus had immediate access to her vital signs through a portable cardiac monitor he'd connected to her chest, and what he was seeing on that monitor was deeply concerning. Her heart rhythm was becoming increasingly chaotic, the electrical signals in her heart erratic and unpredictable. She was in the process of going into ventricular fibrillation, the most dangerous cardiac rhythm, where the heart's chambers were quivering ineffectively rather than pumping blood. "Patient vitals are deteriorating rapidly," Marcus transmitted to Derek, his voice calm but clipped, the language of someone trained to communicate critical medical information under extreme stress. "Heart rate is 148 and irregular. Blood pressure is dropping, 92/58. I'm seeing premature ventricular contractions. She's moving toward arrhythmia. I'm administering oxygen now and initiating IV access." Derek heard the urgency beneath Marcus's professional demeanor. He knew what those symptoms meant. Margaret was seconds away from a complete cardiac collapse. ETA to Colorado Springs Memorial is 9 minutes. "Marcus, what are her chances?" "If we can keep her stable for 9 minutes, we've got a chance," Marcus said, and Derek could hear the determination in his voice. "But she's crashing, Derek. She's actively crashing. I'm going to need you to get us there as fast as this bird can fly." Derek pushed the helicopter forward, increasing airspeed despite the turbulent conditions. The Black Hawk was screaming through the air now, the engines pushed to maximum RPM, every system operating at absolute capacity. The aircraft shuddered and lurched as wind gusts caught it, but Derek compensated instinctively, keeping the nose pointed toward Colorado Springs. In the cargo bay, Elena Vasquez was positioning herself to assist Marcus. She had medical training as well, and she understood that Margaret's situation was critical. She helped Marcus attach additional monitoring equipment, a blood pressure cuff on Margaret's arm, pulse oximetry sensors on her finger to measure oxygen saturation. The portable defibrillator was positioned nearby, ready to deploy if Margaret's heart completely failed. Margaret's eyes fluttered open for a moment. Her hand reached out weakly, and James Patterson was there instantly, taking her hand, pressing it against his chest. "Stay with us, Margaret. Stay with us, baby. The doctors are waiting for you. We're almost there. You can do this." Margaret's lips moved, but no sound came out. Her breathing was shallow, desperate, like she was drowning in air. The look in her eyes was pure fear mixed with physical suffering. The pain in her chest had become unrelenting, a crushing force that seemed to be squeezing the life out of her with each labored breath. "Marcus, her oxygen saturation is dropping," Elena said, reading the pulse oximeter. 88% and falling. Marcus immediately adjusted the oxygen delivery, increasing the flow rate, positioning the mask more securely on Margaret's face. "Come on, Margaret. Come on, you're doing great. Just keep breathing. Just keep breathing and we're going to get you to the doctors." The two children in the jump seats were frozen in shock, watching their mother struggle. The youngest, 5-year-old Emma, had her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with incomprehension. The older child, 8-year-old Thomas, was staring at his mother with the kind of intense focus that children develop when they sense something catastrophic is happening, and they're trying to prevent it through sheer willpower. "Derek, I need hospital coordination now," Marcus transmitted. "Patient is actively unstable. Heart rate is 164. She's in bigeminal rhythm. I'm seeing runs of ventricular tachycardia. She could arrest any second." Derek immediately switched to the hospital coordination frequency. "Colorado Springs Memorial. This is Black Hawk 31 inbound with critical cardiac patient. Approximately 7 minutes to landing. Patient is female, 52 years old, acute myocardial infarction, currently deteriorating. Heart rate 164, blood pressure 90/55, oxygen saturation dropping. Recommend emergency cardiac team standing by for immediate intervention." The trauma coordinator at Colorado Springs Memorial responded with impressive speed. "Black Hawk 31, we acknowledge critical inbound. Deploying trauma team to landing pad now. OR2 is standing by for emergency catheterization. Cardiologist is en route. Will be ready to receive." Back in the dispatch center, Sarah heard the deteriorating medical updates coming through the radio. She felt her stomach clench. All the work, all the coordination, all the impossible effort to get Margaret off that mountain, and now she was crashing anyway. This was the brutal reality of emergency dispatch that nobody talked about. Sometimes you did everything right, you made all the right calls, you coordinated perfectly, and the patient still deteriorated. Sarah immediately began coordinating additional support for the helicopter's arrival. She alerted traffic control to clear airspace, ensured that the trauma team would be positioned correctly, and verified that the cardiac surgical team was standing by. "Derek, patient is showing pre-arrest symptoms," Marcus transmitted, and Sarah could hear the shift in his tone. This was no longer a critical situation. This was an emergency within the emergency. Her rhythm is becoming increasingly chaotic. If she arrests in flight, resuscitation will be extremely difficult in this environment. I'm preparing defibrillator pads, standing by to perform CPR if necessary. Derek felt the weight of that statement. If Margaret arrested, if her heart completely stopped, their chances of saving her dropped dramatically. CPR in a moving helicopter was possible but extremely difficult. The turbulence, the space constraints, the difficulty of coordinating compressions while the aircraft was being tossed around by wind, all of these factors combined to make in-flight CPR a last-ditch measure with poor outcomes. 5 minutes to Colorado Springs, Derek transmitted to Marcus. Hold her together for 5 more minutes. Doing my best, Marcus said. Oxygen saturation is now 84%. Heart rate is 172. She's in sustained ventricular tachycardia now. Margaret, come on, stay with us. Stay with us. The children watched their mother. Emma started crying silently, tears streaming down her face. Thomas reached for his mother's hand, but Alina gently redirected him back to his jump seat. There was nothing the children could do except bear witness to their mother's crisis. In the cockpit, Derek was fighting both the weather and the clock. The storm was getting worse with each passing minute, but Colorado Springs was getting closer. He could see the city's lights beginning to glow on the horizon through the clouds. Just a few more minutes. Just hold on for a few more minutes. 4 minutes to hospital, Derek called out. Marcus, what's her status? For a long moment there was silence on the radio. Then Marcus's voice came back, and there was a tremor in it now. She just arrested. Her heart completely stopped. We're beginning CPR now. Come on, Margaret, come on. Sarah's eyes closed for just a moment in the dispatch center. All that work, all that coordination, all that effort to reach her in time, and Margaret Patterson's heart was no longer beating. Everything now depended on whether Derek could get her to the hospital alive, and whether the surgeons there could restart her heart before her brain suffered irreversible damage. The race had entered its most critical phase. The landing pad at Colorado Springs Memorial Hospital was illuminated by emergency lighting as the Black Hawk touched down. Derek had managed to keep the helicopter stable despite the worsening weather, and he'd flown the final approach with the kind of precision that only comes from years of experience and absolute focus. The moment the skids made contact with the landing pad, a trauma team erupted from the hospital entrance. Cardiologists, surgeons, nurses, technicians, all moving with the coordinated urgency of people who understood that seconds mattered. Marcus had continued performing CPR during the final minutes of flight, his hands maintaining steady compressions on Margaret's chest, Alina assisting, the rhythm the most important thing in the world. Margaret's heart had not restarted. She remained in cardiac arrest as the hospital team extracted her from the helicopter and placed her on a gurney. Dr. Richard Patterson, no relation to James, was the lead cardiologist, a surgeon with 30 years of experience and a reputation for saving patients that most people considered lost causes. He looked at Margaret's monitor and immediately made his assessment. "Full arrest for how long?" he demanded, moving with the gurney toward the emergency operating room. "Approximately 8 minutes," Marcus reported, still providing hand compressions as they rushed down the hospital corridor. We achieved initial response with CPR, but rhythm was refractory. No response to first round of epinephrine. Dr. Patterson's expression hardened. 8 minutes was a long time. Brain damage could begin within 4 to 6 minutes. But this patient had been in a remote location, being extracted by helicopter, undergoing active resuscitation the entire time. She'd received excellent care. If anyone could bring her back, it would be the team at Colorado Springs Memorial. In the dispatch center, Sarah sat motionless at her station. She'd been following the hospital communications, listening as Margaret arrived, listening as the trauma team took over, listening to the radio traffic that indicated Margaret was being rushed to the OR. Tom had his hand on her shoulder again, a silent gesture of understanding. David had stopped working his own calls and was watching Sarah's station monitor, seeing the same information she was seeing. "Falcon, this is Black Hawk 3-1, Derek's voice came through, and Sarah could hear the exhaustion in his voice. "Patient has been delivered to Colorado Springs Memorial. Current status is cardiac arrest, en route to emergency OR. Thank you for the guidance. Your coordination made this mission possible." "Derek, you and your crew are heroes," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the emotion tightening her throat. "Get safe. Get your bird home." "Roger that, Falcon. We're heading back to base now. Let's hope the doctors can do what we couldn't, bring her back." Sarah switched off that channel and sat in silence for a moment. She'd done everything right. She made every correct decision, coordinated perfectly, pushed the helicopter crew to their absolute limits, and Margaret Patterson was alive, technically alive because of those decisions. But whether Margaret would survive the night, whether she would wake up with her mind intact, whether the family would get their wife and mother back, those questions were now beyond Sarah's control. They belonged to the surgeons, the medical technology, and ultimately to factors that had nothing to do with dispatch expertise. Hours passed. Sarah continued her shift, handling routine calls, her mind partially present, partially still tracking Margaret Patterson's status through hospital radio updates. At 6:47 p.m., a message came through from Colorado Springs Memorial. Margaret had been successfully resuscitated. Dr. Patterson had performed emergency cardiac catheterization, found a completely blocked left anterior descending coronary artery, and placed a stent. Margaret's heart had restarted after 52 minutes of combined resuscitation, an extraordinarily long time. The fact that she'd survived at all was remarkable. The fact that she regained consciousness suggested there might not be significant brain damage, though only time would tell. Sarah felt something release in her chest, a tension she'd been carrying since 2:47 that afternoon when James Patterson's panicked voice had first come through her headset. 6 weeks later, Sarah stood in the Boulder County Emergency Services Auditorium. The community had organized a recognition event to honor the rescue personnel who'd coordinated the Patterson family's emergency extraction. The room was filled with media, community members, emergency services personnel, and families whose lives had been touched by the emergency response system. County Commissioner David Martinez stood at the podium, reviewing the details of the rescue operation. This extraordinary rescue was only possible because of the coordination and expertise of multiple agencies and individuals, he was saying. The Air National Guard helicopter crew demonstrated exceptional skill. The hospital trauma team performed life-saving surgery. But all of this depended on one critical decision made by a 911 dispatcher, who recognized danger approaching and acted with the kind of professional expertise that exemplifies true heroism. He looked toward where Sarah sat. Sarah Mitchell, known throughout this region as Falcon, saw the danger before the storm arrived. She anticipated the medical emergency's severity. She coordinated a rescue operation that defied conventional wisdom about what's possible in marginal weather conditions. "Sarah, would you please come to the stage?" Sarah felt her heart jump. Public recognition had never been comfortable for her. She preferred to work in the background, to let her professional competence speak for itself. But she stood and made her way to the stage, where the commissioner shook her hand and the audience applauded. The reason this family is whole today is because Falcon saw the danger from a distance and never lost sight of what mattered, Commissioner Martinez said, and Sarah heard her own call sign carrying weight and meaning. The Black Hawk crew was there. Derek, Marcus, Alina and James were standing in the front row, and Derek gave her a nod of respect that communicated everything he felt about her role in that day's events. The Patterson family was introduced next. James walked to the stage with Margaret on his arm. Margaret moved slowly, still recovering physically, but her mind was sharp and present. The months since the rescue had been difficult: cardiac rehabilitation, psychological recovery, the challenge of reintegrating after a near-death experience. But she was alive. She was coherent. She was herself. The children followed, Emma and Thomas, both of them clutching flowers they'd drawn pictures on. Margaret approached Sarah, and for a moment they simply looked at each other, the woman who'd answered the emergency call, and the woman whose life had been hanging in the balance. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know if I ever had a chance to thank you properly," Margaret said, her voice thick with emotion. "But you saved my life. You and Derek and all those people, but it started with you. You heard my husband's voice and you knew what needed to happen. You knew what the right thing was." Sarah felt her own eyes welling up. She reached out and embraced Margaret, and for a moment the professional distance that she maintained for her own protection dropped away. She was simply a human being who'd done the job she was trained to do, and it had mattered. It had mattered profoundly. "I was just doing my job," Sarah said quietly. "No," Margaret said, pulling back but keeping Sarah's hands in hers. "You were more than that. You were the person who refused to accept that this situation was impossible. You looked at circumstances that should have been fatal and you found a way. That's not just a job. That's heroism." The audience applauded, and Sarah felt something shift inside her. The call sign, Falcon, earned years ago for her ability to spot danger from a distance, suddenly meant something more. It wasn't just a radio identifier. It was a recognition of what she was capable of when it mattered most. Later, after the ceremony ended and the crowd had dispersed, Sarah stood with Derek, Marcus, Alina, and James. The helicopter crew was heading back to Peterson, but they wanted to thank Sarah in person. "You changed the equation that day," Derek said simply. "You gave us the margin we needed. You made an impossible mission possible." "We saved a life," Sarah said, looking at each of them. "All of us together, that's what matters." But as she drove home that evening, Sarah realized something deeper. The call sign, Falcon, had always meant seeing danger from a distance, but it also meant something she hadn't fully appreciated until that day. The ability to guide others through the storm, to provide the steady voice that kept people focused and moving forward, to believe in what was possible even when everything seemed impossible. 6 weeks ago, Margaret Patterson had been trapped in a vehicle on a mountain pass with a failing heart and a closing weather window. Sarah had seen that danger, had trusted her instincts, had coordinated a rescue that existed on the absolute edge of possibility. And because she'd done her job perfectly, a woman was alive. A family was intact. A story of hope had been written. The call sign, Falcon, would always be more than just a radio identifier now. It was proof that one person's dedication, expertise, and unwillingness to accept defeat could change everything.